Thank you for joining us on day 3 of Vogue Global Conversations, The Future of Fashion. My name is Priya Tanna, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Vogue India. In this time of unprecedented uncertainty, many in our global fashion community are looking for a sense of direction. In fact, we're all searching for cues to help us understand the future of our industry in creative and positive ways. These are conversations we've been having on a daily basis. What we will face once this crisis ends, and how will we adapt and change for the better? Vogue, in partnership with Vogue Global Network and Vogue Runway, is looking to provide guidelines and to share insights from our Vogue teams from the world over, along with friends and partners. This is about connecting the industry and sharing thoughts on how we can support and see each other through this. Today's session focuses on the future of e-commerce. In India, where I come from, the base of online fashion shoppers is about 60 million and is expected to double by the end of 2020 to about 120 million. Fashion e-commerce alone was projected to grow 3.5x from $4 billion to $14 billion by the end of this year. But we too are reeling, and I'm left wondering about the future of these numbers. I'd now like to introduce you to Angelica Zhang, Editor-in-Chief, Vogue China, who will be leading the discussion today. We also have some of the Vogue team online to answer questions you may have. You can post these questions in the Q&A section on your screen. Today's conversation is being recorded and will be uploaded to our Vogue websites globally later today. Over to you, Angelica.
Thank you, Priya, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. I am Angelica Zhang. I am the editor-in-chief of Vogue China, and this includes Vogue, Vogue Me, and Vogue Film, 3 brands. It is a great pleasure to host this session today, and our topic is the future of e-commerce. The pandemic has radically changed the consumer behavior, their buying patterns. With people around the world confined to their homes, e-commerce has taken on an increasingly important role in our lives and in consumption. In my own case, confined in my Beijing home for 2-3 months already, so my daily life consisted of basically non-stop video conferencing, and in between running out to the front gate to take deliveries 5, 6, 7 times every day of food, of disinfectants, and of other daily needs. So will this growth in e-commerce expand to fashion and luxury business as well? With the world changing, how will fashion e-commerce evolve? How should we connect and inspire the customers in the new world? So today I'm going to discuss this with a few very influential figures in our industry. And they are Virgil Abloh, founder of Off-White and artistic director of Louis Vuitton menswear. Hello, Virgil. Yes, hello, Virgil.
Hi, Angelica. How are you?
And we have Stephanie Fire, Chief Customer Officer of Farfetch and Chairman of British Fashion Council, and she's connecting with us from the UK. And Virgil is in America.
Hi,
and
Angelica.
Remo Ruffini, Chairman of and CEO of Moncler, and he's speaking to us from Europe. And I'm obviously in Beijing. Hello, everyone. Stephanie, Remo, Virgil, how are you?
Ciao, Angelica. Ciao, everybody.
Yes. Oh, okay, I go straight to our topics. One of the key topics at these days that keep cropping up in my conversations with people from our industries, like the brands and colleagues, is gauging the consumer mood post the coronavirus epidemic. Some people are very positive. They think that customers will come back stronger. They will overcompensate for their sufferings. So some call it revenge buying. But other people think that people are going back to the basics and what's really important in life. And the luxury business will probably become less important to them. So Remo, I want to ask you first. You have a very rich experience, both in business and in life. So what is your take on the mood?
Maybe, I think I'm more conservative. We have worked to find really a new strategy, give new energy to our community, and reorganize our company in this last month. I think reaction is very important, but will be very different from country to country, and depending really on the different culture we have around the world. China is, I could say, is almost back to normal, and but I think it will be very different if we're talking about Europe, for example, that is our biggest market around the world. I think they are much more conservative. I think Europe is a big part of the business in Europe is visitors. I don't think we're going to have visitors in the near future, and so what? I think the company must be, company need to be very flexible. I think we can prepare ourselves, prepare our company, prepare our logistic and supply chain, but then we don't know yet the reaction of the customer. Means flexibility is really the word I use every day when I talk with my people in the company. And I think we have to study anyway, new way to be close with our customer. And for sure, we have to change the tone of our communication. This is, I think, is very, very important. I think it is the time to raise your word, not your voice. I think this is another very, very important point, and we really need to stay tuned with our customer, but again, in totally different way, with totally different value. So I think we have in the last decades, we have few crises, 9/11, the Lehman Brothers, but this is, I think, is totally different. What I learned from the past is we normally have a short memory, and we usually forgot the bad moment very quickly. I don't know if this is the case, because we're really talking about 4 million people, 4 billion people at home today. It means it's really something huge. And that's why I think it's important to change the way to talk with them. I think we have to get really ready for the best restart. But again, I want to stress that predict is very difficult, especially if it's about the future. You know, I think we must be very flexible and ready for our customer.
Yeah. So, but we still have to do the business, and our fashion rests on desire traditionally. So how do we rejuvenate the customer's appetite moving forward? Have you thought about it, Remo?
Yes, I think, you know, another very important thing is for sure the company has to think about the near future. You know, the company has to think about September, October, that for us, they are very important months in terms of sales. But again, to build up, to have a very strong company for the future, I think you have to think about your strategy at midterm. You know, think about what could happen in 2021, 2022. Because I always say to my investors, you know, I don't want to watch the quarter by quarter. I really need, if I want to build a strong company, I really need to see long term. You know, this is very important for me, because if you think about to make revenues in the next 3-4 months, I'm afraid you can make a damage to your company. Means at the same time, we have to build in our company, we have to build two teams, I think. One team is really cares about tomorrow morning, and one team is focused on the brand perception, on the long-term strategy, on the real vision. I think this dual track is very important for the near future to have a good feeling, a good relation. Honestly, again, I don't want to stress, but 2020 is important, but it's much more important to keep your brand very strong.
Thank you, Remo. That's a very interesting point about having two teams. Stephanie, on your e-commerce platform, you pretty much face consumers around the world every minute, every second. So how is business in recent months, and what's the impact on the business, and what's the mood you feel of your customers?
So I think, look, first and foremost, it's a humanitarian crisis. It's a health crisis. I think everyone is immediately focused on that. And I know all three of our businesses have done a lot on that front itself, but it's quickly followed by an economic crisis, of which we're just seeing the magnitude now. And so it's clear that the impact on demand on all industries, including fashion, is huge. We're still growing, but it's too early to tell what the long-term situation will be, and it's moving on a daily basis. It's interesting, you mentioned online, we're very direct with customers, and we can see already patterns of consumption change depending on where different markets are with their lockdown policies. So I think, you know, to Remo's point, it's very hard to predict the future. But what I do believe happens is that crises like this are catalysts to really accelerate certain trends that we were already seeing. So it's not just about the quantity of demand, it's what the shape of the demand will look like. So for example, we will see a shift to online. You know, that stands to reason as people are more comfortable with shopping online. And we will see, you know, I think then certain trends that I really hope will be cemented, like, for example, a focus on sustainability, a consumer-led focus on buying quality and buying better. And I think, to Remo's point as well, businesses will have to work a lot harder to have a differentiating point, because they will have to earn that wallet share from the customer a lot more. People will move to businesses and endorse companies that have a mission and a purpose. And so, you know, we're already starting to see that, not just from an employer side, but actually from a consumer side. And then I think, you know, sincerely hope that a crisis like that, a sort of seismic shift, will force us to rethink some of the perhaps patterns or behaviors in the fashion industry that we know need to change, but this gives us a certain blank sheet. So rethinking fashion cycles, for example, rethinking the purpose of how brands communicate during fashion weeks. So I think ultimately change will be consumer-led. It always is. But I think the industry has an opportunity and frankly a responsibility actually to do the right thing and to change some of these systemic issues in the industry, and then to capitalize on some of the good things that do often come out, you know, the silver linings, as it were, that come out of these crises.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. So now I turn to Virgil. You are a master of following the beat of the street. So what's your take on the mood and the industry generally?
You know, it's an interesting one. You know, I think this time period is a pause to sort of rethink and reanalyze what fashion means. You know, like how we arose to fashion industry that it is today, what gives it its beats. And, you know, as mentioned earlier, that we're in the middle of a health crisis, but we're also in the middle of a global quarantine where people are able to reflect and think about the what inspires them. And I think it's important that our industry realigns itself with the values of the people at hand, you know. And I formally believe that in this time, we don't need to look for finite answers. You know, duality is ultimately okay. I think, of course, this industry, we make dreams and we sell them, on one front. That's the role of a designer and the role of these companies. We're at a position now where I think we can realign ourselves with listening to the consumer first and responding, instead of the previous model, which was sort of top down. Us as a design community or us as a media industry, we project ideas and then hopefully that they take hold. And right now, I think there's so much to draw from that this can be a good thing, as we have these discussions. And I think it's important that my personality and it's important that we as an industry look at this as an optimistic mood. This is our role, this is our life's work, is to be able to make decisions and implement them. And this can be a change for better. I formally don't believe that this is obviously it's a dire and it's in an emergency situation, but this is our calling to sort of make the industry transform into what it can be for the people. We provide clothing, and you can see that in the response. Globally, we've seen great sort of realignment from brands donating to the cause. That may have never happened. Now, if we change that same approach to realigning the industry's goals towards sustainability, diversity, in the same way that we've responded to the crisis, all of a sudden the fashion industry, which could have seemed to be just selling sort of images and this idea of desirability, now we're in the service industry, which I think can sort of unlock a new genre, a new era for our industry as a whole. So I look at it totally as an inspiring time for us to paint the future.
Wonderful. So, but the more specific question, are you still going to produce your autumn winter campaign then? If you are, are you going to change your approach?
Indeed. I think it's a very strong point is we need to show our resilience. This is the time to prove that our industry is a valuable one. So not for a second will I cancel or pause or take time off the sort of calendar of approach. And everything in my end will proceed. I'm finding ways to sort of work harder and more efficient. I've started another collection on top of the collection that I was already doing for June because I have more time. From a campaign and voice point of view, as Remo pointed out, it's critical that we as designers and as institutions and brands realign ourselves with the voice of the people today. For example, just take grocery shopping, and a year ago, we all might have casually gone just to buy things that we thought were, healthy, or we did it for our sort of regular routine. And now the grocery store has become, a depot for vital resources. That one industry or one activity has changed. How can the clothing industry be, adapt to this new voice, and how can we message what our brand means in this new ecosystem? So I think it's humanity first, and not commercial objectives or just sort of branding for branding's sake and making an image just to sell a handbag. That these things need to be thought out at a deeper level, and I firmly believe it can inspire a new level of creativity.
Yeah, thank you, Virgil. Very interesting. But one way of reaching to the people, especially for e-commerce, is social media. It always plays a very important role in e-commerce. Funnily in China, during the lockdown, what we noticed was that many social media platforms just grew big time. But when we started to go back to work, and if the volume dropped as people do not have as much time logging on. So I want to ask Remo here. You did a brilliant campaign on social media with Bruce Weber. I think around the theme like warmth at home. So I want to ask you, are you changing your social media approach from, say, displaying your products and showcasing your brand to actually trying to create a more emotional connection to a wider audience so that it would boost more interest in what the Moncler represent?
Yes, basically I changed everything almost 1 month ago because I felt, was not a moment to show another jacket, another model on my social network. I really think a lot about this and really thought about the campaign Bruce did 10 years ago for us. I thought this campaign was very warm. And I say to my team, we have to change everything. We have to change the mood. I think the people they want something different from us. And I start research the whole picture, and I have found something very, very interesting from this moment, very warm, because I think now humanity, as Virgil said, is everything. I think really we have to change the way to think. We have to change the way to work. I always thought, authenticity and uniqueness was very, very important. I think it's still very, very important, but I feel the approach must be totally different than 3 months ago, 6 months ago. For sure, I want to continue to be emotional because this is our let's say DNA. Also, uniqueness is very linked with unexpected. I really want to be unexpected to our customer because I think is today really you have to try to change your voice. And I think it would become another interesting point is to have a tailored experience. I think this is let's make the relationship between us and the people in the street much more closer. You have another way to talk, another opportunity to talk with your customers. 2 years ago, we changed our model of business. We decided to not have any more a seasonal approach to the market. And I think this is gonna help us a lot, because every month we're gonna build a different content, a different product. We want really to stay tuned with our client, with our customer. I think this is even more interesting because in terms of timing, if you think China is already there, China is the customers are back in the store. Italy is still locked down, and maybe America will be locked down for another 2-3 weeks. Means we can have different approach, different strategy, different vision for the different markets. I think this is something very unique in our industry. But I think in this moment they can help a lot to really have a relation. I think for me, stay tuned with my customer is one of the most important things. Have a feedback from them is another very important thing. With our strategy is our concept of genius, that is monthly strategy. We really can tailor the strategy for different market for the week gonna come in the near future.
Thank you, Remo. So Virgil, but your whole business started pretty much from social media, and you commanded so well to extend your influence using social media. So how are you going to change the way you operate your social media to reflect the new mood?
For me, it's important, authenticity and dialogue. If we think about the trait of social media that's unique is it's new, right? But it's also a two-way street. It's a dialogue. It's not a print campaign printed on a page, in a book. It's a surface that allows the customer to either like the photo or comment back. And I think that immediately is in the right place. It's in the right place for a brand to sort of engage. I think content creation will have to adapt, and I think that what we're seeing is just now, 1.0. I think it will have to advance to 3 and 4.0. And the way that means what we traditionally know as a fashion image or an image to market or a video or a glimpse, I think can get more heartfelt. I think it can reflect the real public and humanity in a more seamless way, rather than a projected idea of what a fashion image is, or a marketing image, or a campaign. And we're seeing a little bit of those strides happen. And, you know, when you think about the type of people casted in those, and the younger generation that's able to make content, to make an image and think creatively. You know, with my work at Louis Vuitton, I've set up a studio that is, you know, hiring a lot of first-time workers within content creation of fashion, just to, it's a studio. It's no more just like a monolithic idea of hiring a big name to make an image for X amount of price. What I do is I hire, you know, 8 people from around the world, and I force them to work together. And I take that budget and I distribute it to people that are making a name in the industry that are undiscovered. And what does that do? Their brains are already tuned to social media. You know, they're not from a previous generation projecting an idea of how to make a 15-second clip for the beginning of the Louis Vuitton runway show. It's in their DNA. And this is the first time that they're given an opportunity to work with a storied brand. And they're learning from each other, and they're cross-referencing things because they're from outside the industry. So that's just sort of one sort of narrative. You know, I probably have 30 of those type of infrastructural ways to take my message and make it fit the format of the new media, rather than thinking of a media format and communication. So ultimately, it's, you know, the buzzword of diversity it's not a marketing technique in the new world. It actually brings new ideas to the table and allows them to further. So that's where I'd like to see the industry latch onto, with, as your question inferred, latch on to social media to find new ways to take it from 1.0 to 3 and 4.0 as ways to relate to the world at hand.
Interesting, the real meaning of diversity. Yes. Yeah. You know, probably change of topic, probably because of the downturn in the business, you know, recently. We all notice a lot of brands are going a lot more directly to the consumers. You know, it's instead of just, you know, doing social media and the traditional branding. In China, for example, the latest trend during the coronavirus epidemic in e-commerce is that e-commerce live streaming. So there are 2 types. You know, one type is sort of more confined group, focusing on VIP customers, where shop assistants just live stream the new products from the shops via WeChat directly to the customers. So that's sort of booming. And the other type is on a much bigger scale. So basically, KOLs and celebrities, they go on a very, very big platform like Taobao and TikTok, and then they live stream products, where basically they sell products directly to consumers at a very big discount. It's fairly in your face selling. Basically, I feel it reminds me of the older style TV shopping channels. And the only difference is that it's a KOL and a celebrity doing the sales pitch. You know, some numbers are really, really impressive. Basically, they generate millions of audience and they do sales in millions of dollars. The highest record I have here is 38 millions of viewers during one session, and doing a business sales of $100 million almost, including a rocket. Yes, actually, an actual rocket, which was priced at $6.5 million. So that was all happened in the last month in China. So obviously, it is not in the same direction of the sleek luxury approach to sales and branding traditionally, which has traditionally involved lavish photographic and video campaigns. Would such direct to consumer approach suit luxury industry? So that's the question. So I want to ask Stephanie first, because as an e-commerce platform, how are you going to do to go more directly to the consumers? Or are you doing it?
Yeah. So I think direct to consumer is a trend that's been happening for a while, but I think direct to consumer is not just transactional. I think both what Virgil and Remo were saying, it's about having a conversation with the customer and really having that two-way engagement. And we've seen it through social media, and we're seeing it now through these new technologies you're talking about that have really taken on in China, the sort of new versions of QVC. And so I think back to sort of the early days of e-commerce, where the brands didn't engage necessarily and let other people have the conversation and own their brand and sort of engage later. And I think a brand can adopt these new technologies, but do it in its own way and work in parallel to all of these KOLs. It's really become about choice. You have to be where the consumer is. You can't control channels, but you can get involved and engage in them. So I think direct to consumer isn't just transactional. It really is about that conversation, which I think all three of us have been saying. From a transactional standpoint, though, I think you will see a lot more direct to consumer. I think brands will want to control their product. I think they will want to move away from sort of large, uncontrolled wholesale, more to concession models where they can really control their product offline and online, and also invest in their own e-commerce. As with everything, it will be a balance and a mix of everything. But what going back to that emotional connection, what I don't think will go away, and whether it's KOLs or influencers, or actually in the case of Farfetch, what is core to the Farfetch DNA is the value of those curators of fashion, the people who have a real point of view around fashion and who really contribute to such a rich tapestry of points of view, because fashion is what's out there, but it's also how different people interpret it. And so at Farfetch, we've really gone back to our DNA, which was always what Farfetch was about, connecting 700 independent boutiques from around the world. We've really worked on a project called Support Boutiques, which is about highlighting those individuals, family-run businesses, small businesses that have a unique point of view around fashion in their local communities. And going back to what direct-to-consumer is, that really is direct-to-consumer. And it's around telling a story and creating that human connection. So, for example, just yesterday, it was gritty. It was on FaceTime, but we did a sort of 3-minute interview with Massimiliano from a boutique called Société Anonyme in Florence, who was one of the first boutiques on Farfetch, and he talked about why he loves fashion, why he cares about it, why he founded the boutique, what it stands for. And I think that mindset shift that we will have to, as an industry, go towards is that, and I think Virgil said this as well, it's not just about selling, it's about actually creating that human connection. And if there was any industry that was able to adapt, I think it's the fashion industry, because we're an industry of storytellers. So I think we're in a good place, but we have to let that flourish. And back to your question, those technologies allow that connection to happen.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yes, so, but since you mentioned Virgil, I'll hand it directly to Virgil. Are you going to go more aggressively direct to customers? Since I know you're trying to grow your e-commerce reach too.
Yeah, in general, I have this philosophy about not being so finite. That's where Off-White came from. It's not black or white, it's both. And I think that's my sort of measuring stick to sort of move through a career in fashion. It's not e-commerce or direct to consumer purely. It's also, that local boutique where you learn about Margiela for the first time from a very passionate sales associate that teaches you, it's like, hey, if you like Margiela, you might also like Comme des Garçons, and I think, how can those stories get richer? I myself was buying online yesterday, and it felt good to sort of search again and find something you like and have it show up on your front door. But how can those both be 3.0 versions of what we knew of them last year? I think is the ultimate goals? How can a model like QVC be advanced? And you do that because I'm very like OCD designer. While we're sitting here, I'm drawing these diagrams of what, because I want to use this as an actual, this consortium of Remo, Stephanie, yourself, we can come up with answers today. That's our challenge. You know, I don't like doing these talks just to talk. It's like we have to solve something. And while everyone was talking, I figured out some milestones. What Remo said about the collective, you have to think on parallel paths, right? So you have short-term, long-term. And what Stephanie just said about more engaging content, you know, across the platform. And what I realized on this Zoom screen, this is all coming because Anna told us before to like be opinionated. So I'm putting it out there. So what I realized is there's 7,053 participants in our chat as we speak right now. And what we said, if I put myself on the line, I said, we must listen to the consumer, right? So it's not just a conversation amongst ourselves. There's 7,059 people that have an opinion on which direction we could go. So I'm going to add a new line to my diagram, which is this: youth. You know, from top to bottom, I think in our industry, the answers are in the participants below us. You know, I guarantee that in each country, there's probably someone who's in the age of 18 to 22 who has the exact answer of what the way to make direct to consumer from 1.0 to 3.0, or what to make the existing retail store experience from the small boutiques 1.0 to 3.0. And I think it's important. I'm using that example to highlight that we as an industry that's already made it into our positions at the companies at which we are, the intern, the person interviewing for a job who distinctly has an idea in this period, has the solution towards an idea that we can't think of. So when you ask me what I'm going to do for my social media platforms, I'm going to take this diagram to heart. You know, I'm going to find someone who's young that I don't exactly understand everything in their ecosystem, and I'm going to give them a seat at the table, because I think it's our parallel paths, which is a mature industry, but it's also bringing in a new voice. Because to finish, when I think of platforms like TikTok, or when I think of, you know, imagine Facebook, or imagine Instagram, those ideas, or Uber Eats, or Snapchat, those are that's going to be the new language of how we communicate. And those ideas are unpredictable in a way, Airbnb. And I think that logic is found in college dorm rooms or teenagers sitting together, finding new ways to communicate. And when we merge those together, then our industry goes forward.
Interesting. Can we have a copy of that chart? You know, I was trying to take a picture when you were, and then my phone, by the time my phone is here, then I was too late.
Published on Vogue.com later today.
Yes, we'll post it later. Yes. We still have a bit of time. So ask probably one last question to each of you. One is, I think globally, you know, e-commerce they're trying to think more locally, especially at a time when, you know, the walls are erected between countries everywhere. And there's a lot of discussion about the future of globalization. For example, in China, you know, because the Chinese market is starting to pick up again, I have a lot of conversations with the brands about organizing campaigns and projects that are more specifically for the Chinese consumers, especially at a time when some of the brands are thinking whether or not even to produce the autumn-winter campaign, given what we know, the reasons. So I want to ask Remo, because, you know, do you feel there's a need to emphasize a more local approach as we move forward, even though our business has become so globalized?
I think this last month helped me a lot to rethink about everything. And one of the major important point is I think two are the most important. Is the the relation with the customer. I think honestly we have to redesign. And the second is the omni-channel. It's not only channel, is not only where we want to sell or what we want to sell. I think we have to redesign really. This moment is really change our mood, our mentality, and I really feel we have to think to be. I don't want to say more local, but to be, let's say, in some way domestic with the global vision, but to be as much domestic as we can. Exactly what I said before. Now we have really the time to concentrate on different market with different timing, because this problem is changed a lot. And this start unfortunately from China and move to Italy and then go to Germany and go in French and then go to the United States. We have more time. I think we must be more local. We must really rethink about the relation we have with the customer with a different culture, because culture are totally different. And I think if you want to really to stay tuned with your customer, you really have to find the new way to talk with them. Having said that, even we talked before, you know, I think omni-channel is important, able to but not only to sell product, again, really to have different way to communicate, use different channel, use different approach, use different attitude, more domestic attitude, I think is the key for today. I feel, you know, we're facing the business for the next few months is really totally different. I think, as I said before, Europe will be, honestly, I think 99% locals, means the approach must be totally different. I think the approach we're gonna have in China will be different, because I don't think that we have too many travelers in China, or too many people from China. They come back to Europe. Means the approach must be as well different, totally different than Europe. Means you have to really rethink about your business. I think you have to really rethink about your way to communicate, and rethink about the way to sell the product to the customer.
Thank you, Remo. Stephanie, can I ask a very specific question that a lot of brands sort of discuss with me about? You know, because we feel that bags and shoes and accessories, you know, still make up quite a big proportion for online sales. How can we sell clothes more effectively through online?
I think that was the question that people were also having in 2000. That's true. But then, you know, we've seen that it is a big market, and people will buy clothes online and will pay high price points. And I think this is where technology comes in. I think there's a lot, huge developments in technology around size and fit technologies, virtual fashion, augmented retail. I think a lot comes in that can really give that experience around being able to sort of feel the clothing online. But I think it goes back to the fact that it's not going to be one or the other. Where I think the direction is going is it's going to be actually an even closer merging of online and offline, where it's going to be about the customer being in the center and experiencing fashion in both environments. So potentially going to their local boutique, seeing it, touching it, feeling it, and then completing the transaction online. And that will be okay, because we will be omni-channel and it won't matter where that happens. And so we really see the merging of the two, in which case technology can come to the rescue and can certainly facilitate the experience if it's a purely online transactional, but technology can also help to actually emphasize the human connection in store, and mean that those sales associates who are in store can actually spend their time storytelling and using the store as a showroom and as a marketing branding opportunity. And so that might be the new billboard. It'll be that conversation that you have in store with that sales associate, and it won't matter that that transaction then happens online. So I think it's both technology and then really accepting that consumer behavior is completely channel agnostic, and that you shouldn't use the sort of sort of set structures of your industry to guide how the consumer shops. You should adapt to that. So I think that's where we're heading, and that will be the most effective businesses, I think, will be the ones that understand how to merge both.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yes. So Virgil, you've had a little bit more time to develop your chart, your drawing. So I was going to ask you something else, but I'm going to ask you, inspired by your drawing, so how do you see the future of fashion? You know, really, what's any ideas and suggestions for the industry, whether it's e-commerce or not e-commerce, you know, generally?
Yeah. Well, I think that this is a time, you know, you're relaying right into a question that I thought a lot about it as my journey in fashion started. You know, I am one of those kids from the participants below that found a way through my work ethic and body of work to sort of be in a position to sort of have a say. And I think this is the time for our industry to really have a coalition. You know, I think I've always thought as Fashion Week as this odd concept where we're all on the same schedule and we each get, you know, an hour slot to sort of show our train of thought. But essentially, if you take the whole schedule of all the fashion weeks from Paris, London, Milan, in Asia, Tokyo, you know, there's maybe, you know, what, a few hundred of us. And we're providing clothes and making businesses for billions, right? So instead of thinking of us as like, as individual silos in competition with the next designer to the right or left of you, and always vying for the customer's attention by, hey, look over here, look at me over here, as if the other one doesn't exist. If our industry is truly going to move forward and really exercise itself as not a vain profession, but as a humanitarian profession, right? You know, there's millions of jobs, there's millions of people who believe in the magic that we create. We should have a formalized coalition, or like essentially this conversation where designers speak to other designers, companies speak to other designers, share resources. You know, marketing messages aren't so singular to say, hey, buy me. It might be like, I'm just making this up as I'm talking, for example, but the new, let's say this for example, just so I make it to a point, the idea of a face mask, right? Last year was maybe just for a particular quadrant of the globe. Maybe Asia was already more tuned to wear face masks as an item of everyday living. Now it's a global fashion accessory. They have yet to be designed. You know, there will be innovations. There's going to be new prints. There's going to be new silhouettes. It's going to be a formalized. It might be the next biggest accessory to or it might be bigger than handbags as we knew of the 2000s. What if this one item, we as a fashion industry made a coalition to make all new masks made, N95, near 100% allergenic, not able to pass on. And that's an innovation that we could borrow from technology or the medical field. So what if that information was given to a young designer the same way it's given to fashion houses, and we as an industry provide fashion accessories that are also humanitarian, and we're sharing those resources and all. I'm just making this up, as you can imagine, but just that change in logic moves our industry from pure vanity to humanity. And it makes us stronger, I feel like, in our conviction in relation to the people, rather than a less divided approach vying for, you know, more economic gains. And you know, of course, I'm on the design side, as well as a brand owner. But I think if our industry evolves in these ways, we come together literally, not coming together just for events, you know, not coming together for award shows. Like I have a strong aversion to just award shows in a creative industry. I think we should use those platforms, you know, whether it's the CFDA or the British Fashion Council or, you know, et cetera. We should use those as physical versions of this conversation and actually make the industry forward.
Yeah.
Yes.
What were you gonna say, Stephanie?
Very good.
Yeah, we've been saying the same thing at the British Fashion Council. And actually what you're saying, so many young designers have actually already jumped onto being open source and sharing their patterns and thinking about how they can collaborate. And the young designers are the ones that I think are leading the way in that collaboration aspect. And so we need the bigger brands to also work that way. But I totally with you, and we need to add that human element. And it will change the face of fashion.
Yeah.
Yes. Wonderful, you know, that we're looking for that new stage, a new era, that where we all work together. Okay, now our discussion is over, but we have some questions, a lot of questions from the audiences, but I just have time to pick a few. So I'll randomly throw something at one of you. There's one question from Tandem Tribe in Spain, which I'll direct to Remo, I think. Do entrepreneurs have a place in the fashion world, or is it an industry that will continue to be governed by large companies? Maybe we just give some shorter to the point answers, Remo, please.
So if I understand well the question is I don't understand well the question is what do you think about the different.
Yeah, basically, is it still okay to start your own new brand when the industry is still governed, is controlled by the big players?
I think it's very important, you know. I think new brand give a lot of energy to the market, and also they give also energy to the companies already established, you know, because I think for us, it's very important to understand what's going on. For example, when every year, every season, I try looking for a new designer. Mostly I'm looking for from the startup, from the people they just start the company, new ideas, new energy, new everything. I think is the life. It's very important to give the possibility to the new brand, to the new designer, to the new entrepreneur to have to make a startup. I think is very interesting for all of us, for the market for sure as well, but as well for me, that I can have a lot of ideas from looking around the world. This I think could be very interesting.
Thank you, Remo. This question I'll direct it at Stephanie, maybe, is from Argentina. How can a small sustainable luxury brand start selling its products on renowned e-commerce platforms? But basically, it's a question for you, isn't it?
I think, well, I think if you're a sustainable brand, you're already in the right place because you're going along with structural change and where the consumer is heading. So I think that's already a good choice. I think it's about what we were saying about direct to consumer. There's so many channels now where you can actually reach your audience and your community. And then I think it's about actually starting to build locally and start with your sort of local boutiques and start getting an audience, and then little by little growing. So it is entirely possible. And I think to Remo's point and the idea around sort of small businesses, they are the fabric of the industry. It is still an industry of small and medium enterprises, and they provide that energy, but also those designers may not then end up having a long-term business, but become the talent that works at the large businesses. And so, you know, keep putting yourself out there, because you might build your own brand, but you might also pop up in the industry in other capacities just because you've put yourself out there. So I think it's really important. And I think it's where the big brands have a responsibility to create an ecosystem to give back to the smaller designers starting up so that we keep that richness in the industry.
Thank you. Last question, Virgil, please. There are two questions, both from the United States. They're similar, so I combine them here. Basically, it says, what advice would you give to new brands emerging? Do we need to approach e-commerce differently than before? I think that's a perfect question for Virgil.
Yeah, I formally believe if you're a new brand starting, especially in this period now, is to do what us as the established group cannot do, which is to think free, right? Sort of detach yourself from the idea of what you thought was sort of measure of success, because I feel like that will ultimately funnel you down a path that is very much something that is being done today. And I think the true success that we'll see from young designers, young brands relating to the new ecosystem is if they think in completely new and fresh ways. And that basically means find ways to relate to who your target demographic is in ways that they've never bought product, ways that they've never seen an image, a marketing image, ways that they've never seen a design. And to Remo and Stephanie's point, those are the things that will attract the attention from your peers, but also from, you know, a big brand that you may want to work for, and it'll change the whole ecosystem. So I think as just a short sort of answer to the question is just do something that hasn't been done.
Thank you, Virgil. I mean, I would love to talk to you guys forever, you know, and going on and on, but I think our time is almost up. I'm sure everybody now agrees that it is time for change, for rethinking about how we conduct business in a changed world. I guess in some way it is an opportunity. When business is booming, we change, we might be inhibited by having too much to lose in the process. But now, when business is at a bottom level, we have less to lose when initiating changes. So I hope the opinions and insights today shared will help stimulating some ideas among the audience. Thank you very much, the audience, for participating. And thank you so very much to Virgil, Remo, Stephanie, for your time and insights. I would love to continue these conversations in the next, in the near future when we see each other again. Thank you very much, all of you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
I've got something to continue to say, that tomorrow, Vogue Global Conversations will continue. And my colleague, Emanuela Fanetti, editor-in-chief of Italian Vogue and L'Uomo Vogue, will host a session on the future of brick and mortar. So, and he's going to do that with Vittorio Radici of La Renaissance, Pete Nordstrom of Nordstrom, and Pierre-Yves Roussel of Tory Burch. The video recording of today will be available on all Vogue websites globally very, very shortly. So watch out for them. Thank you all very much, and take care and stay safe. Stay well. Bye.
Ciao, ciao, ciao.
Ciao.